Alright, so on this video, I'm going to give you my thoughts on Season 1 of X-Men 97 as a whole. Many of you who have been subscribed to me for a while know that I like to do with these Marvel shows, these Disney Plus shows, or whatever show I'm covering, I like to do the episode reviews individually and give my thoughts and then sort of speculate. And then at the end of the season, we do like an overarching review of how everything came together. Because especially with a show like X-Men 97, it's not episodic in the sense that like each episode is a one shot. You understand what I'm saying? X-Men 97, much like its predecessor, has, little adventures, but there's an overarching story that, not only encompasses the entire season, but with some of the some of this whole X-Men animated universe, 92 and 97, the entirety of X-Men, all of it, 92 and 97. So, first of all, I just want to say this. If you go to the 2021, when I did a video about the storylines I want to see in X-Men 97, at least 3 of the 5 they actually have done or are going to do. And it's not one of those things where, as a fan, I'm happy because they gave me what I wanted. It's not that. It's that those storylines are objectively like classic X-Men storylines, like Inferno and Fatal Attractions. They're iconic and they're beloved by many fans, including me. So it would make sense. It's kind of like how when Thanos first appeared in Avengers at the mid-credit scene, right, in the first Avengers, I was with my girl at the time, and I explained to her, like, the Infinity Stones and what he's going to do, and they wound up, doing a version of that story. It's just, there are classic Marvel stories that, people love, that they want to see done with new twists, and X-Men 97 did that. We saw Life Death, we saw E for Extinction, we saw a little bit of Fatal Attractions. We saw Operation Zero Tolerance. There was just a lot of stuff in this first season they packed in. I absolutely loved X-Men 97 Season 1. Every single episode, with the exception of one episode, is an 8 out of 10 or better. Every single one. The one episode that I would say was probably the weak spot of X-Men 97 is episode 6, because not only are they following up on that insane episode 5, remember it, with the attack on Genosha, with, now we know, Bastion Super Sentinels. That episode was, I can't even describe to you. I mean, you saw my review, or you probably heard it. Like, I was in awe of what they did, right? I thought I was watching Attack on Titan for a minute there, bro. It was crazy. But the episode right after was the one that focused on Storm evolving and working with Force to beat the adversary. Was not a big fan of it. I understand why they kind of split up the storylines, because the Mojo episode with Jubilee and Sunspot was like half an episode, then they started the Storm thing. So it's one of those things where it just didn't connect with me. It wasn't that interesting. I like Storm a lot. I'm a fan of Storm. And I'm a fan of Forge. I'm not a huge fan of Forge. Like, Forge is okay. He's a decent character. But, Storm I love. And it just didn't interest me. One thing I've kind of learned about Storm, and this is just my opinion, as much as I love Storm being a member of the X-Men, or even the leader of X-Men Gold Team, which was another beautiful Easter egg they put into this thing, there are so many... That's something else, yo. There are so many Easter eggs in X-Men 97 to hardcore fans of the old video games, the arcade and Genesis ones, the old show, other Marvel comics. We saw cameos from multiple Avengers in this thing. We saw a bit of a payoff to the Peter Parker Mary Jane story. Like, this is without a question, in my eyes, the best show on Disney Plus. And to me, it's the best Marvel Disney Plus show. I think Loki is my second favorite. It was my favorite, but it's my second favorite now, because Loki was so damn good. But this show made me feel things that even Loki didn't make me feel. And again, please understand, don't be like those internet weirdos where I say, I like X-Men more than Loki. Oh, so you hate Loki now? No. X-Men edged it out. Plus, my own personal connection with X-Men because the original show's my favorite cartoon as a kid. I mean, dude, this felt like it was tailor made for me and kids of my era. This felt like it was tailor made for kids of the Fox Kids era of X-Men and the Jim Lee, Eric Liefeld, like the early 90s, late 80s X-Men when they were just the peak of Marvel. And even going into the mid 90s and even the early 2000s with Grant Morrison's run with E for Extinction. These things are really it's good quality stuff no matter what, but it's really impactful for those from X-Men from the 90s. But to my Storm point, I noticed that when it comes to Storm, and I had this same feeling with the original X-Men show, the episodes that are Storm centric, the ones that are just about Storm or the stories about Storm, to me, they're not that interesting. I like Storm in the X-Men. I like Storm's powers. I like her working with the other X-Men, being a leader and her input. But her solo stories have never been that interesting to me. You know what I mean? Like Wolverine, Gambit, they have some pretty cool like solo stories. Even Rogue. But for Storm, I think she's one of those characters that just fits better with a team. Same thing with Bishop. I love Bishop. He fits better with the team. Morph, same thing. The Fantastic Four. I love the Fantastic Four when it's the family, but when they have their own adventures, it's just not that interesting. Maybe Human Torch, but it's just not. But either way, it just didn't connect. Episode 5, though, I mean, they're trying to give it like an Emmy nomination or some kind of award. I saw that, and it certainly deserves it. And then you've got the last 3 episodes, the conclusion of Operation Zero Tolerance, which is Tolerance is Extinction. Absolutely phenomenal stuff. They were able to, with this show, break the restrictions that Fox Kids had on the original show, which is, they did serious storylines, but don't go too serious. Don't go too real. This episode discussed that. This episode discussed like what is love between a parent and a child and a couple, like Cyclops' conflict with Jean Grey and Madeline Pryor. I will say that I would have loved to have seen more scenes of that. Like, that is one thing I will say as far as, like, constructive criticism goes. I would have liked to have seen more scenes of Cyclops trying to deal with this story with Jean Grey and Madeline Pryor. And, of course, the Wolverine aspect of it. That's something that I felt that they could have done a lot more with and had some really powerful stuff because that was some of the realest stuff on this show. Rogue having to deal with her feelings for Magneto and her feelings for Gambit. Like, again, another love triangle. They really did a phenomenal job here. Beast trying to be a class act. Interestingly enough, in this season, Wolverine, who's always been my favorite X-Man and everyone's favorite X-Man, when you think about it, it's either him or Gambit. Wolverine took a back seat this season. He was not the primary focus. Now, I'm okay with that. I'm actually okay with it because the writing was so good and the characters are so pure that I'm perfectly fine with Wolverine not being the centerpiece of the story, but still, what they did with it, I mean, even from the first episode, the very first one where Wolverine and Gambit worked together to take on the new Master Mold, like, the first episode was literally like a soft reboot in a way of that's kind of what it is, of the original X-Men, because it had so many homages to not only Night of the Sentinels, but the entire first season. And I do feel like coming up with season 2, there will be a focus on Apocalypse and maybe the Beyond Good and Evil storyline, and we'll talk about that probably in a different video. I'm excited for that. And of course, deep down, when Xavier went into Magneto's mind, it wasn't quite like what happened in Fatal Attractions, but you could tell, and it certainly feels like they're going to do Onslaught at some point. I'm not saying it's going to be next season. I thought it would be, but at some point, and that's going to be a big one. That's going to be a big one. But with season 1, it really did feel like they were going for a very different vibe. Not a completely different vibe from the original series, but it really felt like the show was made. Like I said, for the 90s kids who have grown up, it's almost like the show recognized how the impact of anime and shows like The Boys and Invincible and a lot of this more, not necessarily adult from like a sex point of view, but adult as far as mature storylines, sophisticated animation, things of that nature. It feels like X-Men grew up with its audience, yo. It feels like this X-Men 97 show is made for people who love the original but are now older and can appreciate deeper storytelling. And that's why, like, the stuff with Cable and Cyclops and Jean and Madeline Pryor is so powerful. The story of, I've never had a kid die, and I've never had to give a kid up for adoption. But Cyclops did that, and it's painful. He didn't literally give up Cable for adoption, but in a way he did by sending him to the future. You understand what I'm saying? So it's one of those things where they hit on a lot of emotions here, and the original show did the same thing. It's almost spellbinding as to how good they did it. And there were a few little things here and there you could have, like the nightclub scene could have been done better in the first episode. There's a few things here and there that could have been done better, but the relationship between Xavier and Magneto and how complex it is, I was so happy they hit that right, because one of the core fundamental aspects of X-Men, and really the backbone of it, is Xavier and Magneto. That's what it is. Two sides of the different coins. They're arch rivals while also being best friends. And that's a very, 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 very unique dynamic, because they have genuine love for each other. Like, they care for each other. And when they work together, they can make magic. But they have two completely different views on the world. And, one of the things that's very subtle that people don't pick up on is the fact that when Magneto fights the X-Men, Magneto is an Omega level mutant. They even said that in this show. But when he fights the X-Men, he's always, most of the time, he's suppressed. He's not using his max power, because if he did, he would be way more dangerous. And we saw him do that in the comics and Fatal Attractions and in Tolerance's Extinction Part 2 at the end when he ripped out Wolverine's claws, which was a tribute to that. Magneto could have done that at any point throughout history, and it took him completely going nuts before he actually did it. So it's very, very, very interesting. Very, very interesting that they were able to keep that complexity and to let everybody know, like, look, Magneto does not want to kill any mutants. He doesn't want to fight the X-Men. He's not, the mustache twirling Magneto of the 60s is different than the one that was written by Chris Claremont. He's more of a complex character, and that's the better Magneto. And we saw him use that Omega level power. Then we have Bastion. Dude, that freaking Bastion might be my favorite villain of X-Men 97 so far. I mean, Mojo had his place. Apocalypse is going to be a big one next season. But, dude, Bastion was so... It wasn't the exact same Operation Zero Tolerance story, but dude, I remember being a kid reading Wizard magazine, learning about Operation Zero Tolerance. I never read the entire story when I was a kid, but it's crazy because they actually did it and did it relatively well. They really did. And the way Bastion kept transforming near the end, like, it was so much fun. And you can tell there's so much, like, rich, creativity put into this while still showing love to the classics. I do have my hats off goes to Bo DeMeo and everybody else involved in this show, because X-Men 97 might be the best thing Marvel has done since Endgame. And like I said, that includes No Way Home. I love No Way Home. I'm not saying I didn't. Please don't do that thing I mentioned earlier. Oh, do you hate it now? No, I loved it. It was the best thing from Phase 4. Easily the best thing from Phase 4. But, man. Well, Loki was great too. But, man, X-Men 97 hit me the way Endgame did, as far as just being incredible, incredible art and incredible storytelling. What a triumph this was, and I'm happy, but I'm also sad, because I want season 2 right now, and we have to wait. Damn. Anyways, man, what'd you think? Let me know in the comments. X-Men 97 season 1. Take care.